Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyaus Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragnis Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantirame Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravir Maheti Rudrayatte Takshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. We begin today on verse number 269. Jnatva swam pratyagatmanam buddhi tadvritti sakshinam sohamityeva sadvrittya anatmani atmamatim jahi. Knowing one's inner self, who is the witness of the mind and its thought waves, renounce the identification with the non-self with the help of the thought wave, I am that. So what is translated here as thought wave is the Sanskrit word called vritti. If we visualize the mind as a lake and there is water, and we know that the water in a lake has waves and ripples, and it's kind of pretty disturbed. And that's how our mind is. All the thoughts, emotions, feelings, worries, anxieties, everything is like a ripple on the wave of the mind. Now, each of these waves or ripples is called a vritti. That is why in his Yoga Sutras, Patanjali defines yoga or concentration as stilling of all these waves. When all these waves completely subside and the water becomes completely calm, transparent, motionless, then that is the state of yoga. And that is what happens in our minds as well. That when we say the mind is very disturbed, what is really meant is that there is almost like a storm going on in that lake with all the thoughts, emotions, and all of that. And of course, a storm is not a very peaceful experience. And so we need to find a way to calm these waves down. Now, who is the one who witnesses these movement within the mind? And that is what described here. The inner self, the Atman, who is the witness of both the mind and the vrittis, the lake as well as the ripples on the lake. So how do we renounce the identification with the non-self? Because all the mind as well as the waves inside the mind are not self. They are not the Atman. They are a part of the material universe. And because I'm identified with the mind, every wave in the mind affects me. It's like if there are huge waves in a lake and you are on the shore, you are seeing those waves, but you are not directly affected because you are not in that lake. But suppose you are in a small little boat, a rowing boat, in that lake, and these big waves are coming, you are affected by those waves because then your boat will go up and down. Now, if we were not identified with the mind, then of course, let any commotion go on in the mind, we won't be affected by it. But our problem is, my boat is inside this lake of the mind. And therefore, I'm identified with not only the mind, but everything that is happening within the mind. Now, the way to renounce that identification is with the help of a thought wave, I am that. Now, I am that in Sanskrit is a portion from the Isha Upanishad called Soham. So, when we read the scriptures, the knowledge that we get as a result of reading is also creating a wave. Every activity of the mind creates a wave. So when you're reading now this book, it is creating a wave inside. So if I consciously think I am the Atman, I'm creating a wave, a vritti in the mind, which corresponds to that idea that I am the Atman. Sometimes they speak about removing one thorn with the another thorn. It's a little bit like that. Our goal is to eliminate all waves. And one way of eliminating these waves is to create our own wave. Because a lot of the waves that occur in the mind, they occur without our consent. By that I mean, a lot of times we don't want to think about something, but those thoughts keep coming. We don't want it. So when these thoughts come in the mind, they don't take our permission, they just come. A lot of times many of us want to meditate, and we want to meditate well, but we get distracted. Now all those distracting thoughts, they don't take our permission, because if they took our permission, we would say, no, this is my meditation time, don't come now. But they just come. So a lot of things that are happening in the mind, it's my mind, I'm supposed to be the boss there, but it's being like if you in an office, if there is a boss and there are several people working under that boss and no one cares for the boss, no one listens to the boss, then it's going to be very difficult for the boss to get anything done. But that's precisely our condition. The mind is our office, if you like. And everything happening here, nobody is taking up. They're just doing things on their own. And so we suffer because of that. And so when they say restraining the mind, having the mind under control, means being a very efficient boss. And so one way of dealing with that is, it's a little, I'm kind of now, different scenarios are coming to my mind. And one way would be, if there are people in your office, your subordinates who have to report to you, but who don't care for you, who don't listen to you, then one way of bringing peace, so to speak, is to bring your own person, a powerful person in that office, whom you trust, who is completely loyal to you, and give that person a big role and ask all these people that you are answerable to that person and that person is answerable to me. Now that person who comes is so powerful, so efficient, such a good manager that eventually he either eliminates the rest of the office staff and does everything by himself or herself, or somehow brings complete peace. Now that's a kind of a very wild imagery. Now this is a little bit like that. So here is this mind, and all these thoughts and memories and worries and anxieties are coming, and they're not taking my permission. They just keep on coming. I sometimes don't get sleep at night, and I get worried, and all the time I'm anxious. So now I need to bring some trustworthy, loyal person to bring order in this inner mental office. And so I bring this manager called Soham. I am that. Now that's also a wave, that's also a vritti. So the more consciously I start saying Soham, I'm creating another thought wave. Now, that Soham, I am that, and that here refers to the Atman, not a material entity. So while all the other waves relate to this material, perishable world, I'm consciously creating a wave. It's also, a wave is a material entity, but it's a wave that is related to something that is not material. So this one wave, and I keep on focusing on it intently, then that wave becomes so powerful, so big, so huge, that it eliminates all these other waves. And that's what is said here. Renounce the identification with the non-self with the help of the thought wave, I am that. Now, many of us have our own meditation practice, and that's what a devotee does as well. Even when we do japa of the mantra that our Guru has given us, when we do mantra of the when we do japa of the mantra that our Guru has given us, we are doing the same thing. So we are creating a conscious wave of relating to someone or something, a reality, a being, a truth that is not related to the material world. And here it is in the form of our own Ishtadevata. So the mantra that we chant, we are creating this manager wave, if you like, which ultimately takes care of all these other waves which are disobedient, which are just doing their own thing and bringing me pain. Now this wave that I consciously create is a source of great joy, because here is something that takes me away from the material perishable entities. Now in the case of, if our chosen deity is a personal being, then what this wave does is it first eliminates all the material forms and names, and only this divine name and form of Sakara, Saguna, Ishvara remains, and then it is this personal wave that automatically merges and takes me to the impersonal wave. Now Soham, in many respects, is an impersonal wave. We are not really referring to any specific form or a specific attribute or a quality. So either way, whether we go with something like Soham or we go with the mantra that our Guru has given us, the methodology is exactly the same. And that's why what we are trying to do at the time of meditation is consciously hold on to the sound of the mantra, to the form of our chosen deity. In other words, we are just holding on to this one wave. There are different ways this gets visualized, and that is the mind being a perishable entity. There is a school in Buddhist thought called Kshanika Vijnanavada, which really means that everything in life is momentary, impermanence of everything. So just like, although we are saying that, one wave, but we know that waves, when we go to the ocean or go to like a Lake Michigan or something, the wave just doesn't stay on top. The waves are always kind of going down, coming up. It's a movement. There is always a constant movement. So similarly, why can't we say just repeat the mantra once and hold on to that wave? It doesn't happen that way. You repeat the mantra, then the wave goes. It's almost like a boom, 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 boom. It's kind of thing, because the moment you think of something, the next moment you need to think of that thing again, because if you don't think of that thing again the next moment, some other wave will come and take that spot. And that is why we keep on repeating the mantra again and again and again. The idea is that I'm going to keep on consciously creating this one vritti over and over and over again, and not allow any other vrittis to come and interrupt the flow. And when we say we get distracted during meditation, what is really happening is this one wave that we are creating with the sound of the mantra and the form of our chosen deity gets interrupted by other waves. Now, we don't want that interruption to occur. And that's why we need to focus, because and that's why one of the things that our teachers often advise us is, even if other thoughts and forms come to the mind at the time of meditation, don't pay attention to them. Because every time you pay attention, then that wave becomes bigger. If you just ignore it, then it kind of somewhere remains in the background, but you don't pay too much attention to it, and then it goes away on its own. And so if I don't have to pay attention to something, it's like this. If someone tells you, think of anything, but don't think of this one thing. And then you're like, oh, I should not think of this. I should not think of this. But you are thinking of that. While thinking, you should not be thinking about it. You are actually thinking about it. And so the best way to not have to think about something is to then think about something else. If you don't want to see someone, then see something else. Because a vacuum often gets filled up by things that we may not want, things that we do not desire. And therefore, if I desire God, if my love for the spiritual ideal is so high that at the time of prayer, at the time of meditation, I'm going to say, that's all that I want. And I'm going to totally ignore everything else. At least during the moments or the minutes that I am praying and meditating, I should convince myself that for those few minutes, nothing in life is more important than the sound of my mantra and the form of my chosen deity. Only with that kind of firm affirmation of the importance of what I'm doing, then there is some chance of being successful. Because if we think about our spiritual practice as just one of the many chores to be completed in a day, then of course, if we do other things with not so much attention, we'll probably do our meditation also in the same way. But if I convince myself, if I know deep down in my heart that this is very important, and one of the ways that we are going closer or deeper in our spiritual life would be the relative importance of our spiritual practice becomes more and more as compared to the other demands that life makes of us. And therefore, if I can consciously keep on creating this wave related to God, related to the spiritual ideal, related to the Atman, over and over and over again, even if I can do it, say for 10 minutes or 15 minutes or half an hour or whatever the amount of meditation I do, the chances are that that practice, at least a little bit of it, will continue beyond the time of my meditation. It's a little bit like when you are driving. As long as you are pressing and using gas to drive, your car is going to accelerate. But after some time, when you have the desired speed is reached, and then you say, okay, I don't need to pump more gas into it, and you just kind of take your feet off the gas pedal, and then the car continues to move because of the momentum that it generated. Now, eventually, of course, it's going to slow down, and then you need to put more gas. A little bit like that happens if we have been meditating well. Then even when we get up after our meditation, that effect, that feeling, that calmness, that focus, that will continue for some time, even after that meditation is over. And of course, eventually, your car is going to slow down. And that's why after some time you find, oh, I'm gone back to my old self again. And then we kind of renew ourselves when you meditate again in the evening. So we need to find a way of intensifying our practice, even if you're meditating just twice, 2 or 3 times a day, but intensify it in such a way that the effect of that will remain even at the time when we are not ostensibly meditating. So that is what is said here. So all the other waves related to the material world, the perishable world, can be stilled, can be removed, can be eliminated by consciously creating this wave related to my spiritual identity. Verse 270. Lokanuvartanam tyaktva dehanuvartanam shastranuvartanam tyaktva swadhyasa apanayam kuru. Eliminate the superimposition on the Atman after giving up conforming to the societal demands, bodily demands, and scriptural demands. No matter how much we might tell ourselves that we are free, that we have all the freedoms, we may discover that we are not really as free as we think. There are several ways our freedom can be restricted. Now, in some totalitarian countries, whether it's a dictator or a dictatorial regime, people do not have political freedom, economic freedom, and social freedom in many ways. So there it's the government or the regime that tells people, you can do this, you cannot do that. And so there the freedom does get restricted. Now, even in parts of the world which think of themselves as a free society, it's true. There is a greater degree of freedom in these parts than in some other parts. But even then, we cannot say that we really can do whatever we want, although many libertarians probably think that would be an ideal thing. I mean, there has to be some order. So when we drive, there are speed limits. We are told you cannot drive faster than this speed. You cannot just drive wherever you want. If there is a one-way street, that's the only way you could go. And so, yes, there are some restrictions, but we understand that those kind of restrictions are necessary. Now, there are a lot of other invisible restrictions. No one is telling you to do something. No one is telling you not to do something. But deep down you feel that's what I should do. And that's what is meant here by societal demands. Loka anuvartanam. Sometimes in Sanskrit there are these two terms, lokanuchara and deshanuchara. That is, if you don't want to be an odd duck in a group, in a community, then for most people believe the best thing to do is just do what everyone does. The moment you stand out too much, then you always run the risk of just things that potentially experiencing something that may not be a very pleasant experience. And so people say, just do what everyone does. There is I think, isn't there a phrase like, when you are in Rome, do what the Romans do, or something like that? That's the kind of an idea. And that's what is referred to as the societal demands. And so we know that there is a certain way of behavior, a certain way of dressing, a certain way of doing, a certain way of greeting is expected in the community in which we live. So although it's not an official rule, but we feel that I must conform to it. Now, conforming to something is actually a restriction on one's freedom. So that's lokanuvartanam. Dehanuvartanam, bodily demands. Now we know that the body has demands, of course, clearly. Just like my car needs gas, my body needs food. That's how we survive. And so clearly, food, rest, the need for sleep, this is the demands that the body makes. And some of these demands, we could say, are legitimate demands, clearly. Unless we just want to starve ourselves to death, it seems reasonable to be able to eat, to be able to keep the body and soul together, as they say. We know also that just to be healthy, we need 6 to 8 hours of sleep at least every day. So some of these are reasonable demands that the body makes. But the body is not always very reasonable, because then there is a desire. Even if I've had enough sleep to recover from my exhaustion and get ready for work, sometimes the body will say, I want to sleep a little longer. And therefore you don't care. Even if the alarm set by you, you want to ignore it. Or if the food is very tasty, very delicious, and it's vacation, and so if there are some restrictions your doctor has put upon you, and then you say, no, the body says, I want more of this. Now, to give in to the demands of the body like this is again taking away our freedom. We think that if I choose to eat more on a certain day, I might think that I'm working out of freedom. I can do whatever I want. But really, in reality, the body is making that demand. The mind is making that demand. And I'm surrendering my freedom to the demands that the body and mind are making. I mean, in some way, that's true in meditation as well. I mean, we sometimes complain and saying, oh, I'm getting distracted. I'm not able to concentrate. But who is stopping you from concentrating? The mind is pushing all these thoughts and ideas in the mind, and I am surrendering to my mind. And that's why I'm getting distracted. I'm allowing myself to get distracted. If I say no, the mind can bring whatever it wants, but this is this one thought I'm going to hold on to, then it shouldn't. But again, as we saw earlier, the mind has gotten out of control. And when something or someone has gotten out of control, to bring it under control is not that easy. If you have a pet at home, or a dog or a cat, you know, if you have trained it well, it can bring a lot of joy. If you have not trained it well, there's a problem. Many parents understand this also. When children, when they are very little, it's such a great joy. But then everyone who has a teenage kid at home, all parents probably will think, oh my God, this baby was so sweet and so wonderful and listened to everything I said when I was like 2 or 3 or 4 years old. And look at this person now. Not everyone, but we know, you know what I'm saying. So again, if we have an obedient person to deal with, then it's a sense of joy. Now, that's probably the situation with our minds. The mind is like a teenage kid who is refusing to do whatever we want it to do. And we want the way to calm the mind down. So again, the demands that the body and mind makes, I must find a way to bring them under control, because that takes away my freedom. And finally, scriptural demands. That's interesting. We are sometimes encouraged to read scriptures, but also recognize that, do I follow what the scriptures say because I really don't want to do it? What to do? The Vivekachudamani is saying I have to do it. So I hate it, but I have to do it because then they're taking away my freedom. So all of these things I can do, but can I do them out of freedom? And that's essentially the essence of these words. How much of what we do in life, we are doing it out of freedom, and how much of what we do in life is because our community demands it, our society demands it, my body and mind demand it, or the books that I read demand it. Is my entire life going to be simply somehow or the other to satisfy the demands of all these things around me, and I just keep on saying, oh, this is what they want, this is what they want, this is what they want, and keep on doing it, and every day I'm getting older, until one day I get old and I die. And all that I've done in my whole life is trying to satisfy the demands of each and every entity around me. That's not freedom. Now, it's not that these demands are always very bad or unreasonable. As I said, the demand of the body to eat food or rest can be a reasonable demand. It's necessary for my survival. But can I do this because I want to do it and not because I am forced to do it? And that's why the practice of occasional fasting is a way of affirming that I am the one who decides when I should eat, how much I should eat. Because the body sometimes can get used to the routine. Oh, it's breakfast time, it's lunch, it's dinner, this is what I want. And we keep on doing it, but occasionally if I fast, and then it's breakfast time and the body says, breakfast, then you say, nope, today I'm not going to give it to you. Or it's lunch, and you say, no, and the body says, I want all these things, and you say, no, today you just have to have this one little thing. So, at least occasionally, can I assert my ownership of the body? That I own the body does not own me. Sometimes the mind might say, do this, and I should be strong enough. That's where willpower comes in. That's where I can say, the mind wants it, nope, you're not going to get it. And that's the way. If I can't do it even occasionally, what chance have I? I'm no different from a machine. And a machine can do a much better job than I can if I'm just no freedom at all. And that's what is the essence here. At a deeper level, it's the sense of duty that strengthens our body-mind consciousness. Because all duties are connected with our physical and psychological being. And so, yes, it's good to do things out of duty, because doing things out of a sense of duty, it teaches us discipline, it teaches us restraint. But doing the same thing without the sense of duty is even better. So if parents take care of their children and say, well, this is my child, so it's my duty to take care of my child. Okay, you can do that. But why can't I say I'm taking care of my child because I love my child, not because just it's my duty to do so? Or if I'm studying and I can say, well, now I'm a student, it's my duty to study. Okay, that's good. But why can't I also say, I want to study because I love studying. I know the value of knowledge. So the thing that is done doesn't change. But am I studying because it's my duty to do so, or because I feel I want to do it? It's important for me. And so one way, and Swami Vivekananda deals with it extensively in his talks on Karma Yoga, that we must work as a master, not as a slave. And doing things out of a sense of duty, there is some kind of an external expectation imposed upon me, a duty that is expected of me by my family, by my society, by the scriptures. And at some point we might say, no, I'm going to do all of those things. They may be very good things to do, but I'm going to do it because I love doing them, because I want to do them. Not out of fear, not out of just like, oh, I'd rather be doing something else, but it's my duty to do so. Not a very happy situation then. Verse 271. Lokavasanaya janto shastra vasanaya picha dehavasanaya jnanam yathavannaiva jayate. Right knowledge never arises for those who have desires related to the society, the body, and also the scriptures. So, what could be the desires related to the society? And sometimes this can be thought in terms of the desires that sometimes people have for recognition. And that sometimes these are very real. Sometimes people feel, oh, I'm doing so much, nobody recognizes me. And so what I have really done is I have made my own happiness dependent on other people's recognition of it. And if I don't get it, I'm upset, I'm angry, I suffer because, oh, other people are not recognizing what I'm doing. But why have I given that, why have I surrendered my freedom to be happy on my own rather than my happiness being dependent on whether people recognize it or not? And that's what is meant here by desires related to society. Lokavasana, sometimes called lokeshana, the desire to be recognized by society in some way. Name, fame, celebrity would all come into that. A desire for physical well-being. Now, physical well-being is good, is important. It's in fact necessary as well, because if there is an extreme pain in some part of the body, then clearly it's understandable that at the time of meditation, you are going to get distracted. It's very difficult to meditate if you're having a severe headache or so on. And so a general well-being is actually a good thing to strive for. But it's a very tricky balance in some ways. When does physical well-being cross over into an obsession with one's body? Because the more I get obsessed with my physical health, then I am strengthening, I'm intensifying my identification with the body, and which is not good. If I have to create that wave that I am the Atman, then this obsession with the body, the obsession with the mind are really creating these other strong waves identifying me with the body and mind. And so we need to get this just right, of wanting to have physical well-being, psychological well-being, emotional well-being. These are all important, but not allowing any of these things to cross over into being obsessed with my physical health or being obsessed with my own mind. Because that's the real danger that spiritual seekers have to guard themselves against. Because we are talking about the Atman, the self. But oftentimes, the only self that most of us know and most of us live and move in is our ego. And so, the more we talk about the Atman, the more we have to remind ourselves it is not the ego. Because otherwise, people can become extremely self-centered. And that self-centered is not Atman-centered. It's that ego, that false I, the I that is connected with the body and mind. So instead of taking me closer to my true being, I might end up strengthening my identity with the false being. And so we have to guard ourselves against that. And these verses will help us recognize what is true freedom. What am I really doing? What are the kind of demands that my own body and mind make from me? What are the kind of demands the society makes from me? What are the demands that even scriptures make for me? And that's why this verse says, right knowledge never arises for those who have desires related to the society, the body, and also the scriptures. The scriptural desire would be to be recognized as a big scholar. Sometimes if you are having discussion with your friends or over tea or coffee, you're sitting around a table, and if you're studying a little bit of this Vivekachudamani or the Gita, and maybe in the group which is sitting there, they haven't studied all this. So sometimes people feel, just quote one verse of the Gita and say, this is what is said in the Gita. And then we're like, oh wow, you have studied the Gita, and that's great. And you just feel a little good, yes. This is the desire related to scriptures. The study of scriptures is for the clarity of our own mind. The study of scriptures is not for impressing other people. And that's again very, very subtle. Sometimes we might think, oh, what's wrong? Yeah, well, if you are mindful, you might be able to, I'm not saying in every case, but we might be able to see that there may be a subtle desire in the heart to be appreciated by others, to be recognized by others as, oh, this is a very spiritual person. And so there could be desires related to the scripture as well. And therefore, as long as we have these desires related to these three things, right knowledge will not arise in the mind. Verse 272. Samsara kara gruha moksha michhoho ayomayam pada nibandha shrunkhalam vadanti tadnya patuvasanatrayam yosmad vimuktas samupaiti muktim. The wise say that these threefold desires, we saw just now, related to a community or society, related to the body and mind, and related to scriptures, are like the iron chains that bind the feet of one who wants to be free from the prison of samsara. One who becomes free from these attains freedom. Now, we cannot free ourselves from these by physically separating ourselves from them. Most of us are living in society. We can't just say, oh, I'm just going to go to the forest. Not practicable. And therefore, we are living in society, living with our family, our neighborhood, our friends, but somehow to make sure to preserve our own freedom, and the best way to do it is to live in harmony with all. Because whenever there is a lack of harmony, a part of our mind gets engaged in trying to deal with that disharmony. And to that extent, we cannot then put it on the Atman. And so best we have to find, again, everyone's situation is different. There is no one universal law or a rule to apply. But we have to study our own specific situation and see what is the way I can live in harmony with my environment without compromising any of my core values and principles. Similarly, we cannot leave our body and mind. That's the only instrument we have. How can I use these instruments well without allowing the body and mind to run roughshod over me? How can I make them my friends and not my enemies, so to speak? And finally, scriptures. We need scriptures. Without these great texts, we wouldn't even know where to find for truth, how to do it. But again, even reading the scriptures, we have to be very careful, because there is this ego related to scholarship, ego related to, oh, I know more than you because I have studied this. So study of scriptures is not to impress anyone. It's not to do anything. It's just for our own clarity, our own understanding. And so we have to do it with humility in the heart. There is a saying that vidya dadati vinayam, true knowledge bestows humility. So if any of these things increase the ego in me, makes me more proud in some way, there is some problem. It's actually increasing my ignorance that way. And so we have to keep these things in mind. And that's why this verse says that these three desires are like the iron chain that bind me to the prison of this samsara. 273. Jaladi samsarga vashat prabhuta durganda dhuta guru divya vasana sangharshane naiva vibhati samyak vidhuya mane satibahya gandhe. The sublime fragrance of agarwood bursts forth only when the profoundly bad odor due to its contact with water, etc., is removed by friction. Now, agarwood is one kind of scented wood, little bit like sandalwood, not identical with it, but it does have a similar function. And both sandalwood and this agarwood, you kind of rub it hard. Some of you who have done sandal paste for our puja here, you know how much friction is necessary in order to get that chandan, get that sandalwood paste. And once that, through that friction, you are able to get it, and it gives a wonderful, a very fragrant scent. But sometimes, if even a sandalwood, piece of sandalwood or agarwood, if you just kind of keep them with someplace, and there is a lot of moisture, and it's just covered by this layer of water for a long time, and you just keep it that way for some days, and then you go, actually it gives pretty bad odor. But once you start rubbing it again, and with that friction, again that beautiful fragrance comes. And so that is what is referred to here. The sublime fragrance of agarwood, and just like sandalwood have sandal paste, after friction agarwood is what is called agaru. And so although they are two separate ones, they are kind of used in these two verses, this and the next, almost interchangeably. So the sublime fragrance of agarwood bursts forth only when the profoundly bad odor due to its contact with water is removed by friction. Look at the next verse. In the next word, they use the word sandalwood. Antashritananta duranta vasana dhuli vilipta paramatma vasana pradnyati sangharshanato vishuddha pratiyate chandana gandhavat sputam. The desire for the Supreme Self is covered by the dust of the endless and harmful desires for the non-self. It manifests clearly like the fragrance of sandalwood only when purified by the intense friction of knowledge. So there is this analogy given with this either agarwood or sandalwood, that when it is simply covered by moisture and just left, it doesn't give a good fragrance at all. But only when you rub it against something, only with friction, a beautiful fragrance comes. So similarly, our own body and mind is like that moisture that has accumulated over us, the desire for the non-self. And it's endless, because by endless is meant that it won't end on its own. It won't end unless we do something about it. Because sometimes people think, oh, desires, they'll remain for some time and they'll go away after a while. No, they don't. They go, but they don't go out somewhere and disappear. They go back into my mind, go back into this unconscious mind. And when in the right time, when I'm most vulnerable, these desires will again come forth. So they are not really going anywhere. They're just going and hiding somewhere. It's like if you have rats. I hope you don't. There's a big rat problem in the city. But sometimes you might think, if you haven't seen the rat for a while, you said, oh, thank God, finally the rat is gone. But maybe not. Maybe hiding somewhere in some remote corner, and then suddenly when you say, oh no, the rat is still here. Our desires are like that. There are hundreds and thousands and millions of them. Sometimes you might feel, oh, the desires have gone. I haven't had this. I've not been troubled by the desires for the last 6 months or 6 years, and I'm now free from them. Don't be too sure. It's like that rat. It will be in some corner hidden somewhere, and suddenly it will come, and you'll be surprised yourself. Oh my God, from where did this desire come? And we have to be therefore on our guard. And that will completely go, just like that sandalwood example, through friction, and that friction is of knowledge. So only knowledge can remove all these desires, because desires are a sign of ignorance. I mean, ignorance can be removed only by knowledge. And now this is the last verse we'll do for today. Anatma vasana jalai stiro bhutatma vasana nityatma nishtaya tesham nashe bhati swayam sputam. The desire for the Atman shines brightly on its own when the innumerable desires for the non-self which eclipse it are destroyed with a constant commitment to the Atman. Very simple, very straightforward. Constant commitment. And you can feel free to replace the word Atman by your own chosen deity, your own Ishta. They are not different. It's the same Atman, the same reality that for my own benefit, at this present stage of my evolution, has taken this form and taken this name and has become more accessible to me through the mantra that I chant. So they are not different. And if I hold on, if I chant this mantra, if I pray to my Ishta, eventually I will go to the same impersonal being. So do not create this kind of a duality or conflict in your mind with this quest for the Atman and then your own personal devotion. They are not different. They are one and the same. And so we see there are these two things to be done. One is the negative part, the other is the positive part. The negative part is every time my mind is drawn towards these desires, to look deeply and ask myself. Now, the word desire kind of gets demonized a lot. So we have to remind ourselves, we have to keep in mind that not all desires are bad. We just have to, every desire that comes in the mind, I need to look at it closely and ask, if I act upon this desire, will it make me stronger or will it make me weaker? And strength can come at different levels. It can be physical, mental, moral, emotional, intellectual, spiritual. Now, if any fulfillment of any desire can make me strong at any of these levels, I should say yes to it. That desire is not bad. But if my mind tells me that this desire is going to make me weaker in some way at any of these different levels, then I have to think 100 times before acting upon that desire. And so once I destroy these desires that make me weak, and that's the negative part, destruction of the desires. The positive part is consciously holding on to this wave related to the imperishable reality. And that those who do japa, those who do meditation, that's really what we are doing. Consciously creating a big wave that will remove all these other petty, worldly, material waves. And if we can do that, in that heart, the desire for the Atman shines brightly on its own when the innumerable desires for the non-self are removed. So we need that kind of a constant commitment to the spiritual ideal. So we'll stop here today. If you have any thoughts, ideas, comments, questions, feel free to ask. Yeah.
Swamiji. Swamiji, verse 270 talks about giving up conforming to societal demands. Would societal demands also include duties that we have towards, say, our family or work duties or?
Yes, yes, conforming in the sense, yes, please. Yeah. What it means is that, yes, we have duties towards our family. Now, what I would do as a fulfillment of those duties, I should ask myself, am I doing it because, well, I really don't want to do it, but it's just my duty to do it. And as I said, doing things out of duty is not in itself bad. Sometimes it does teach us discipline and so on. So it has its benefits. What Swami Vivekananda points out is, the very things I'm going to do as duty, if those things are good, why can I not do the same things because I want to do them? Because out of freedom, because it is good to do the things. So it's not that not conforming to society means not doing our duties, that doing what needs to be done because I want to do it, not because I'm pushed to doing it. That's the idea. Okay.
Swamiji, today you talk about a lot of mind, how mind can take us to where we want to go as a spiritual person. But mind is the only tool we have which can take us to the desire for spiritual path. So how could the same mind, is a conflict? So is there, like you always say that there is a spiritual heart. Is there any spiritual mind? As a spiritual seeker, sometimes I know the right thing to do when I'm doing something, but somebody comes, no, this is not the right thing. So I don't know if my mind is doing, or if it's coming from heart, which has their own mind to teach.
Yes, yeah, good question. The truth is that our mind has already gotten divided. And therefore, and there are different words used in scriptures for this. Sometimes they speak about like a higher mind and a lower mind. And a lot of times when we have a dilemma in the mind, we have an inner conflict. Now, in a conflict, you need two things. Now, that conflict is occurring in the mind. So, in other words, a part of my mind is on one side and the other part on the other side. sometimes people speak about that higher mind or higher part as a voice of conscience and so on. So people express it differently. So there is a part of our mind which is very idealistic, a part of our mind which is inspired by these high ideals. And there is this other part of the mind which is still being pulled by the world and my connections with the world. And so that's why we have this inner conflict. Sometimes a part of my mind, let's say I have this great interest in just the soccer World Cup, for instance, we just concluded, and fascinating as it was. And in fact, the finals were on Sunday when we had a puja here that time. Now someone who is a soccer fan would say, I want to attend the puja, but there's also these finals going on at the same time. So now, should I do this? Should I do that? A part of me might say, oh, well, I can always watch it later on, the recorded version. Or the other mind would say, oh, the puja comes every year anyway. If not this puja, I could attend some other puja. But the soccer World Cup comes only once in 4 years. So we might have all these arguments and counter-arguments. Now, both these are occurring in the mind. And that's why I said the mind is kind of gotten divided, a part of the mind. And that's what the Gita sometimes speak of as the mind can be our friend, the mind can be our enemy. And so what has happened right now in pretty much the lives of all of us, a part of our mind which is closer to the spiritual ideal, which appreciates it, which is idealistic, is kind of already a friendly person for a devotee. But there is this other part of the mind in which all these other values and principles and desires are filled in. And there is this tug of war going on. So eventually we need to find a way, one of these two is eventually going to win. The question is which one? Because a lot of times you will see, and oftentimes it happens, not always, but oftentimes we find that especially when we are very young, people are very idealistic when they are very young. But as we grow older and we come in touch with what they sound like the real world, the hard, cold reality of the world, as they sometimes say, we see sometimes the harsh realities around us, and people make compromises. People feel that unless I compromise on this, I cannot go ahead. I cannot reach my goal. I cannot reach whatever deadline I need to meet. And so the fire of being idealistic, the noble values, in many cases get a little bit tarnished, get a little bit thing by what people sometimes glorify by just saying, I'm just being practical about it. But really, from a spiritual standpoint, I'm compromising it. That's the reality. And that's where these conflicts then begin to start. And I'm not saying it's very easy to not allow this to happen. There can be some real challenges. And everyone is struggling. It's not that only a few are struggling. Pretty much everyone is struggling with this of how much to compromise, how far to compromise. And is that compromise for life or is just a temporary arrangement? When can I go back to being fully idealistic? And so on. And so yes, so to answer your question, both these strands of thought are in our own mind. Okay, so we will stop here today. So we did 275, And so this is our last meeting before the winter recess. So the next time we meet, it will be in mid-February. And that time we will start with verse number 276. So if you get a chance, although we won't be meeting every Wednesday for the next few weeks, I would encourage you to listen to that part of your mind which says, look at this book a little bit during this time. And there's a good reason why you should do that. Because I know that these kind of long gaps can sometimes be a break. That continuity is broken, that momentum is broken. And it sometimes can then become difficult to kind of take it up again when we meet. Sometimes those people who don't do meditation regularly and kind of do it in a haphazard way, do a whole lot for a few days and then few days they just don't do it at all. They know it doesn't work that way. And so it has to be done day after day after day after day. No holidays, no. And so we are not really taking a holiday from scriptural study. We are not taking a holiday from meditation. All that we are doing is collectively, we will not be meeting for a few weeks. But individually, personally, your study, your spiritual study, and your prayer and meditation, if you do it without any break, that momentum will remain. And then the chances of being enlightened become brighter that way. And so the goal is not simply just to feel a little good. That way, people have different ways of feeling good about it. You don't need meditation for that. But to be free from these iron chains to this prison of samsara, that's the goal. So if we are tormented by this bondage of samsara, if we want to be really free, not just little bits of freedom that everyone experiences now and then we need to keep up the practice in our personal lives without any vacation, without anything. Collectively, yes, there'll be times when we may meet sometime there are going to be gaps, and every collective activity, every organized activity is like that. But personal practice should continue without any gap. And so that's the ideal that Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother and Swamiji have put before us. And that's what we all try to follow. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. So before our winter recess, we have 2 programs ahead of us. This Saturday, we will have Christmas Eve celebration. It begins at 6:30 in the evening, immediately after Aarati. So we'll have prayer, meditation, we'll have readings, we'll have carols, and we'll have refreshments. And so all of you are welcome for Christmas Eve at 6:30 on Saturday. And there are no other functions. There is no satsang next Sunday, no Vivekachudamani next Wednesday. But on the following Sunday, that is the New Year Day, 1st of January, which we sometimes celebrate and have celebrated for many years as Kalpataru Day, this 1st of January, we will have a Vivekananda Puja to celebrate Swamiji's birthday, because we will be closed when his birthday falls. This time it comes on the 14th of January. And so we will celebrate it on the 1st. But this will be a fully online puja, as we have been doing the pujas this year. So you all will be able to participate in the puja online from home. So the only one in-person event, that is Christmas Eve, and then online puja on the 1st. And then we are closed for the recess, and we reopen on February 12th, Sunday, which will be the satsang. So that's what we will do going forward. So let's conclude with a prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.